Jon Rahm walked into that Oakmont press room carrying more baggage than any player in that field. Not about his swing, not about the course. Something far bigger was sitting in that room with him, and everyone knew it. The questions came fast, and what he said next didn't just shock the reporters in that room, it sent a signal to the entire PGA Tour that nobody was quite prepared for. Now, on the surface, it sounded calm, almost casual. But if you actually understood what was happening behind the scenes at that exact moment, what LIV Golf was dealing with, what the PGA Tour had just quietly put on the table, and what Rahm's own future was hanging on, those words hit completely differently. Because this wasn't just a press conference answer, this was a man drawing a line in the sand right before one of the biggest tournaments of his life. The question is, which side of that line did he just put himself on? Personally, I think the answer exposes something the tour hasn't wanted to say out loud. Drop your take in the comments once you hear the full picture. Do you think Rahm is making peace with his situation, or is something else entirely going on? And if this kind of inside golf coverage is what you're after, subscribe. You're exactly where you need to be. So here's what actually happened in that press room. Reporters pushed him directly. LIV Golf's Saudi backers had just gone public with the news that funding was ending after this season. The PGA Tour had opened a formal pathway back. Koepka had already used it. The question was obvious. Rahm, are you next? He didn't flinch, didn't deflect, didn't give the safe diplomatic answer every PR team in sport would have coached him toward. He said he has several years remaining on his LIV contract, and then came the line that stopped the room. He doesn't see many ways out. Sit with that for a second. This is a man who left the PGA Tour at the absolute peak of his powers. Reigning Masters champion, world number 3, the kind of player every tournament wants in their field, openly admitting, not hinting, not suggesting, that he cannot see a clear exit from the situation he walked himself into. But here's what most people covering this story completely missed. That statement wasn't just about a contract. If it was purely about paperwork and lawyers, he would have said nothing and let his agent handle the noise quietly behind closed doors. The fact that he said it out loud, on that stage, at that exact moment, that tells you something much deeper is going on. What that something is becomes a lot clearer once you see exactly what LIV Golf looks like right now from the inside. Because the numbers are not pretty. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, the organization that bankrolled this entire operation, formally announced it will no longer fund LIV Golf beyond the 2026 season. Not a rumor, not a leak, an official statement. They use the phrase "no longer consistent with our investment strategy." In financial language, that is a quiet goodbye. To put the scale of this into perspective, LIV's non-U.S. operations alone reported losses of nearly $600 million in a single year. The total Saudi investment across the life of the league is projected to surpass $6 billion by the end of this season. $6 billion. And the return on that investment, in terms of television ratings, mainstream breakthrough, and commercial revenue, never matched the ambition. The New Orleans event got postponed. The PIF chairman quietly stepped down from LIV's board. The CEO was publicly talking about finding new investors while trying not to sound like a man whose building was on fire. This is the environment Rahm stepped into at Oakmont. This is the backdrop behind those 5 words. Here's where it gets harder to watch, because the exit door wasn't just theoretical, it was wide open, and Rahm walked straight past it. Earlier this season, the PGA Tour did something it had never done before. They created a formal returning member program, a specific structured pathway designed to bring elite LIV players back, and it wasn't open to everyone. It was targeted directly at players who had won a major or the Players' Championship between 2022 and 2025. That list had 4 names on it: Koepka, DeChambeau, Cameron Smith, and Jon Rahm. Koepka took it without hesitation, quietly parted ways with LIV in December, applied for reinstatement, and was back competing on the PGA Tour by January. No drama. Clean exit, DeChambeau, Smith, and Rahm all looked at that same door and said no. Now DeChambeau had reasons. Smith had reasons. But Rahm's situation was different from both of them. Because Rahm wasn't just choosing to stay out of loyalty or preference. Rahm was telling the world he is contractually unable to see a way back even if he wanted one. That is not the same conversation. That is a man describing a cage, not a choice. The contract details make that cage feel even smaller. When Rahm signed with LIV in December 2023, the reported figure was $300 million across multiple years. The largest total LIV contract ever signed. Bigger than Mickelson, bigger than anyone. And LIV's lawyers, by Rahm's own admission, did a thorough job drafting it. Reports indicate the deal runs through 2028, possibly 2029. With the Saudi funding now evaporating, the question of who actually honors that contract going forward becomes genuinely complicated. Think about what that means in real terms. Rahm is tied to a league that is actively searching for new investors to survive. A league that has already started canceling events. A league whose primary financial backer just publicly walked away. And the man at the center of all of it, the face of LIV Golf, the two-time major champion, the player they built their credibility around, is standing at a US Open microphone saying he doesn't see many ways out. That image alone should tell you everything about where this situation actually stands. What makes it even more layered is what Rahm did quietly in the weeks surrounding all of this. Away from the headlines about contracts and press conference statements, he reached an agreement with the DP World Tour, paid his outstanding fines, settled a dispute that had been running for over a year, and secured his eligibility for the 2027 Ryder Cup at Adair Manor. And then, for the first time since he walked away from the PGA Tour in 2023, Rahm added the Scottish Open to his schedule, a co-sanctioned event, meaning for the first time in nearly 3 years, Jon Rahm will technically be competing inside a PGA Tour event again. Not a full return, not a reconciliation, but a foot in the door that wasn't there 6 months ago. He's still a LIV player, still under contract, still publicly saying he doesn't see many ways out, but he's also quietly rebuilding bridges that he spent the last 2 years burning. That contradiction, the public statement versus the private actions, is what makes this the most fascinating storyline in professional golf right now. Because one of those two things is telling the truth about where Rahm actually sees his future heading. And they cannot both be right at the same time. The real question sitting underneath all of this isn't whether Rahm returns to the PGA Tour. The real question is what happens to his contract if LIV Golf cannot find the investors it desperately needs before this season ends. Because if that money stops flowing, the calculation Rahm made in December 2023 changes completely. The $300 million reason to stay starts to look very different when the organization writing those checks no longer has a blank book to write from. And that is a question nobody in this story has answered yet. Not Rahm, not LIV's CEO, not the PGA Tour. What we do know is this: a player of Rahm's caliber at this stage of his career, standing on the Oakmont stage before a US Open, publicly admitting he feels trapped, that doesn't happen in a healthy situation. That happens when a man is trying to be honest about something he hasn't fully worked out himself yet. Where do you stand on this? Was the $300 million worth what it has cost him? Drop it in the comments below, and if you want to follow exactly how this unfolds across the rest of the season, subscribe. This story has a long way left to run.